What's up? What's up? Welcome everyone. This is a new episode of the Myles High Pod. This is Myles Jr, your host. As you know, on the pod, our vision and goal is to always entertain, educate, and elevate you miles high above your fears, your doubts, and any limitations that you may think exist, always knowing that those limitations only exist in your mind. All right? Excited for this pod today. We have a guest, a special guest, a good friend of mine. The team is here. Everyone looks good. My guest looks good. And without any further ado, I want to jump right in. So today's guest is a good friend of mine. I've known him for quite a number of years. We share similarities in our stories, and I thought that it would have been a good talking point for us to come on and share our similarities and a lot of our differences as well to the audience, to you, our audience. So I want to welcome on today's episode, Mr. Chef Simeon Hall Jr.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Chef, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's amazing to be here.
No, thank you for joining, man. Thank you for joining. So let's get started. I wanted to start with an introduction, right? I want you to give a backstory of who you are, like where you're from, how did things begin for you. So let's start with your birthplace. Where were you born?
Well, I was born right here in New Providence. Mm-hmm. My dad's mom is from Turks Island. Okay. She migrated here some years ago. And we've been, Bahamian born and bred. Right. And I love it. I love it. This is a special place.
No, it is. It is 100%. 100%. Yep. And I think I appreciate it more the more I, as I grow and as I mature.
Yeah, for sure.
The island, it means so much more to me, the older I get. Yeah. So tell us about your upbringing. Your family. You were born. I think you have 3 other siblings, right? There's 4 of you guys.
I have 2 sisters and my nephew who lives with us. Well, lives with my parents, and so we were kind of brought up pretty close. Okay. And I'm the middle and only son of a preacher who is pretty well known in the Bahamas. All of his days, still now. He's retired now, but he still gets in somewhat of some trouble because he's a agitator and he's a disruptive thinker. Sure.
So that's the similarity that we share. Your dad was a pastor, similar to just like my dad was a pastor. So we're both PKs.
PKs.
And for those of you that don't know, I know a lot of people might not have heard the term PK before. It stands for preacher's kid, pastor's kid. Yeah. Whatever is easier for you to say. But we're both PKs, right?
Yes.
And
proudly so.
Oh, absolutely. And I got some questions I want to ask you about that too, because that's, I think I have a different outlook on that as far as being proud of being PK, right? Yeah. But, okay, so you grew up with your 2 sisters and cousin in the home. How was growing up the son of a pastor?
Well, I never really had any issues with it per se, because my dad was always somebody who encouraged us to be us. Everybody knows my dad as bishop or pastor. I know my dad as that. You know what I mean? It's different in the house. A lot of people don't realize that people, especially preachers, are human beings. They kind of deify them and put them in a space that they shouldn't be in. Whereas when you're home, I know my dad to be somebody who cooks the worst grits amalgamation known to man, because that's his go-to dish, but it comes out great. I know him to be a comedian. I know him to be very, very humorous. And I know him to be big on education. So, whereas a lot of people may have been pushed or think that they would have been pushed to go to church every day of the week, my dad was like, you need to get in your books every day of the week. Right. So it was totally different. And my dad was always somebody who taught us to think for ourselves and to always pursue excellence. To sit down and have a 5-minute conversation with my dad could fuel you for weeks. You know what I mean? Because he's that smart.
Yeah.
And so that's what I know. So I was never one to be. I think for a lot of people, they almost bully you in this. Oh, you have to be like your daddy. And I always used to ask him, what your daddy is doing? Do you do what your daddy is doing? So if your daddy is a police, why you ain't a police?
No,
if your daddy is a chef, why you ain't a chef?
You know what? That's a good point. I never thought of
I used
that.
to ask them that. So, I was always that person that people is leave alone.
Yeah.
I still that person people don't want to get in too much conversation.
No, I could appreciate that, right? Because, obviously, I think this is our similarities, especially growing up, right? You had people, first of all, they used to ask me the same question, like, how was it growing up in the house of, someone like Dr. Myles Monroe? And I'm like, bro, to y'all he is Pastor Myles, Dr. Monroe, whatever, but to me, he's daddy. You know what I mean? So, he... Unlike your dad, though, my dad could have thrown down in the kitchen. Like, he was a great chef in the kitchen. So we used to appreciate him. Like, when he cooked, he used to do a lot, like overdo it, like try to show off or whatever. But it always came out good, though. So my dad could have cooked. My whole family could cook, actually. So it was just like normal in our household. And then, as far as the expectations and like I guess people expecting me to follow in my dad's footsteps and being a pastor, like that was one of the things that I guess swayed me more to like not like being the pastor, the son of a pastor, right? Just because of like these expectations or whatever. But we'll get there at some point. Yeah. But you spoke about how big your dad was on education, right? Yeah. And I could relate to that as well. So tell us about like your educational background. Like where did you go to high school in the Bahamas and then college and all of that?
Well, I went to the best public-private school in the Bahamas. Princeville. 30 bites. Absolutely the best. Everybody knows it.
That's debatable, but okay.
It's the best private public school in the Bahamas.
Private public.
And so after graduating there, then I went to UB, or College of the Bahamas, where I was actually studying architecture.
Okay.
Because I always had this thing in design. But really and truly, my heart was in food the whole journey. So then I went off to Tennessee, where I flipped from architecture because I realized you had to be a brainiac to be an architect.
Right.
Because it's more about math and numbers than it is about drawing. And I wasn't into that at all. Then I thought I wanted to be a guidance counselor, right? So I went and I did biology and psychology to become a guidance counselor. The problem with that was in Tennessee, which has a huge Bahamian diaspora, I was cooking all the time. Like I was cooking legally and illegally. Because I worked for a few restaurants and stuff like that. And then truth be told, I mean, they can't do me nothing but this now, but I mean,
Careful.
I was literally like going to school,
okay,
and then coming home to cook.
Okay.
Bringing products in from Nassau and cooking them like full-on Bahamian extravaganzas.
Just 5-course Bahamian meals.
110%.
Wow.
Bringing pigeon peas in my bag and things like that. So it was something that I realized more and more that was what I was supposed to do. And I never got away from the design or the guidance counseling part of it. Because if you was a chef, you was a guidance counselor.
Absolutely.
110%. And architecture, I'm in design because I design kitchens and stuff like that.
I see the connection. So when you went off to school, like after you left College of Bahamas at the time, you went off to Tennessee. When you went off to Tennessee, were you still initially majoring in architecture? No,
I was doing biology and psychology.
And how long before you decided to go full on into culinary?
I think I was there less than 2 semesters.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, because mind you, I was doing amazing. I was doing absolutely well, 4.0 GPA, the whole 9 yards. But my heart wasn't in it. So I came back and I did the apprenticeship program at then BHTC, and I nailed it. Like
Okay.
really, really did really well. Graduated Dean's List, Student of the Year, Apprentice of the Year, the
Oh, wow.
whole 9 yards. So, and then I also did a double major in hospitality management.
Okay, makes sense.
So I was always the person who was pushing. And I also became the first and unfortunately the only student that did an exchange program, which was a pilot program. And when I did that, I went to South Carolina and I graduated with a 4.2 average.
4.2,
Yeah,
not 4.0.
4.2.
So you was above.
Yeah, I was smart until I
got you
met
right, Chef.
until I
Right.
met girls. Then that was it.
I guess that's all our stories,
Yeah.
right? Nah, but that's so great. So you graduated with a 4.2, and I guess the next step was jumping into some type of professional job or
Yeah,
something. So
yeah.
let's talk about that. Like where did your job market start, and then let's talk about the progress to where you are now.
Well, I started off really and truly right after I graduated. I literally walked downtown and worked for free for 6 months at different restaurants.
Okay.
Just literally, hey, I just graduated school. Here's what I did. I want to learn. I'm not ready to run a kitchen, but I'm definitely ready to learn. And so I literally just went downtown and was walking around and got a couple jobs. Then I moved off to the Family Islands where the opportunities are beyond great. And so I lived in Andros for a while as a young chef, and I learned a lot from there. Because I was telling somebody just the other day, when I first went to Fresh Creek, I made boiled fish. And of course, I thought my boiled fish was the best.
Yeah.
Until the lady who was there was like, Chef, what is that?
With this trash.
This is long water. Like, you come from town. This is some Nassau boiled fish. We don't eat boiled fish like that
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
And so it was very brothy, very loose, no flavor. And she corrected me. And I really appreciated that. And I stayed, literally, I was the chef, but I was learning from her for about 2 years.
Okay.
Because she really, I started off making, for example, I talk about it all the time, parboiled peas, right? And you can't buy parboiled rice in Fresh Creek.
In Andros, yeah.
They don't sell it. So if you come there and you try to make parboiled rice, comida is run you out of it. So I literally, I was a young chef that literally got scolded for 2 years straight working in Andros. And I really, really appreciate that. Fast forward to today, I've literally, before COVID, I was working in Hawaii. And
At which hotel?
at the Four Seasons.
Four Seasons Hotel.
Four Seasons.
One of my favorites, yeah.
I managed the largest restaurant in the Four Seasons, Oahu.
All right.
And so it was something that was absolutely amazing.
I could imagine.
And, me, I dive into culture. So I was literally, finding out more about Hawaiian cuisine, Pan-Asian cuisine, stuff like that. And so, there's a difference between Hawaiian poke and mainland poke. So now I come back and I'm like, that's not poke.
That's not,
Does mango go in pokey?
No, absolutely not.
it absolutely does, Chef. It absolutely
not.
does. This is
Absolutely
this
not.
is an argument he and I have all the time.
No.
If you like poke bowls, which I do, mango is supposed to be a part
Absolutely not.
of
What are
poke
you
bowls.
talking about?
He doesn't agree.
It's just like Hawaiian pizza. Do you
Oh.
know that I
Another
could
one.
not get?
Pineapple's supposed to go in everything, guys.
I could not get none of my Hawaiian cooks to make an Hawaiian pizza. We had to change the name to ham and pineapple pizza.
Wow.
Because when you call it out and say, order in one Hawaiian pizza, they
don't know
wouldn't
what that
move.
is, yeah.
They say, Chef, what that is. Don't come here to insult us because we don't know what that is.
Right.
So, somebody like me dove into it to find out that it was created in Canada for somebody as a novelty dish. And it's actually an insult to the Hawaiian people. So we changed the name.
Okay. All right.
So me, it's just like conch salad.
Yeah.
You could get conch salad with all this fruit cocktail in it these days.
Chef, don't hate. Don't hate. The dish has
I-
evolved. This is another argument that we have.
Coming around, Chef.
Like, I thought you would like
No, I appreciate it.
You
but
still like the
I'm
old school.
still Very traditional.
Oh my goodness.
But I understand because conch salad is different in Bimini. It's different in
Grand Bahama.
Abaco, New Providence, and several other places.
So for our listening guests, our listening audience, and those watching us as well on any platform you're tuning in. So conch salad is a native dish to the Bahamas, right? And there's a traditional way of making conch salad, and there's new gen way of making conch salad. So the traditional way is with your onions, tomatoes, green peppers, lime, salt, and the conch, right? This new way of making it is all of those ingredients you just mentioned, but they're adding fruits to it. So like tropical fruits like mango, pineapple, apple, strawberries. So
just think about that. Strawberries and conch.
look,
It's
come on.
delicious.
It may sound
me.
weird, sound off.
Hey, man.
But bro, that little twist they made to the conch salad, that does it for me.
But let's just make sure that we let people understand the evolution is that is a New Providence style
Absolutely.
of doing it. When you go to the other islands, just as people from here don't know what pickled conch is,
Yeah.
which is Grand Bahamian.
Grand Bahama. And then Grand Bahama is
Mayo.
add mayo in their conch salad.
No,
too.
Abaco.
Well,
Abaco. You can get it in Grand Bahama,
Right,
but
right.
it's primarily in Abaco, which is amazing. Absolutely amazing.
It tastes good. It tastes like coleslaw. I mean, crab salad.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So again, for the last 15 years, even through all the places that I've worked, I've literally been studying the DNA of Bahamian cuisine and Bahamian food culture. So that's where all of my emphasis is these days.
So you worked in Hawaii for, you said 4 years?
No, 2.5 years.
2.5 years.
Before the pandemic.
And then the pandemic happened and you had to pivot and you moved back home.
Right.
And let's talk about your transition into moving home and your profession here. Because you started off, I think, doing private chef?
Yeah. So when I came back home, I primarily did, I was waiting to transfer back to the Four Seasons here.
Right.
I stayed at the Four Seasons here for a short time, and then I really went into my private chef and event work.
Catering. Mm-hmm.
So our event work is, again, all about storytelling. The private chef work is about getting people to have a authentic Bahamian experience, regardless if it's a high-end or an affordable event. So basically, we've been doing that for the last several years in conjunction with some consultation, and then we launched our first restaurant in about less than 2 months.
Let's clap it up for Chef launching this restaurant. Long time coming. I remember those first conversations we had. It's always been a dream of his.
Yep.
And ironically, the name of your restaurant?
It's PK's.
PK's. Preacher's Kid.
Yep.
That's amazing, man. That's amazing.
Yep.
So the restaurant is opening in our new Nassau port, our cruise port.
Right.
In Nassau, Bahamas, downtown Nassau. So if you're ever in Nassau, for those foreigners that don't live here and for those locally, once the restaurant opens, I think it opens in another 6 weeks.
Yeah, we should be up and running by the end of July.
Okay, July. So end of this month. End of this month, it'll be open.
And yes.
End of this month, it'll be open. So shout outs to the chef. I'll definitely be taking advantage of getting spoiled with the food. I love Chef's food. A lot of his events that he does it when I'm not in town, which he and
I don't know who fault that is.
Nah, but if you ever get an opportunity to taste his cooking, I highly recommend it. So that's where he is. That's where he is at now with his profession, about to open a new restaurant. I'm happy for him, man. I've really appreciated your growth and your transition back home, and like everything that you've done since moving home. So yes, let's go back to you. So your dad was a PK. Sorry, your dad was a pastor. You're a PK. And you didn't choose to work in the same profession as your father, right? So first of all, why culinary? What drew you to the profession of culinary?
Well, that's easy. Mainly because my grandmother, who stayed with us mostly when I was younger, she was one of the first black restaurateurs of the region.
Okay.
So she owned a very famous restaurant called Nola's Baked Crab in the now widely developing area of Carmichael. And so I worked with her a lot. I saw her cooking a lot. And then my mother's mom, she was a chef all of her life as well. And so there was food all around us.
Okay, so that's in your blood.
Yeah. So when I went to my grandmother, my mom's mom, it was either bread baking or really, really delicious food, all Bahamian cuisine done very, very well, very authentic. And that's where I learned a lot of stuff that I now do now. But my dad's mom, she was really, really successful with her restaurant. And her main dish, which was stuffed crabs, literally, she's sent crabs to Buckingham Palace.
Oh, wow.
Because when they came down for a trip, she catered a part of the royal visit. They loved it so much, and then they had it. And then my grandmother also catered movie sets. And so now that's what I'm doing as well. So I'm no stranger to any of that. Now, sorry, if you ask me, why did that have such an impact? Because again, it was something that I felt comfortable with. And being around my dad, he was always somebody who said, you know, do what you're good at.
Do what you love to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you kind of you knew that this was the path you wanted to head down from a real early age, right?
Yeah, I think I was a little bit reluctant between the years of graduating
High school
and then going off to college. There was some uncertainty there, but again, like I said, I was thrust into it.
What was the uncertainty?
I didn't know if being a chef at the time, back in the early 90s, being a chef wasn't as popular as it is now. There weren't as many avenues given to us. That nobody was talking about movie production. Nobody was talking about developing products. I'm working on 5 different products right now to come out in my online store and in grocery stores and stuff like that. Nobody ever told us about that.
Right.
And so I didn't know that would be something that I wanted to do full time. For most people, being a chef was quote unquote a hobby or a hotel job. And I was never one to think that that's all there was to it.
Sure. So you chose the profession of culinary, being a chef, head chef in particular. So how did your dad feel about it? Him being a pastor, you being his son, you know, I'm sure he, you know, deep somewhere inside, he, you know, wanted you to follow in his footsteps and maybe take over the church in some aspect.
Well, maybe.
Okay.
But, you know, I think my dad knew I wasn't the one for them 3 o'clock wake up calls, all them counseling, all them other, you know, he's still waking on me still, and I bought him something.
No, I get it.
So I don't know if I was ever that person who would be all of that. I definitely supported and did what I could, and there was some great memories of church days. There was one time that I was very young, and I remember helping my dad with his sermon. And I thought that was amazing. Like in my head, I was the producer. You know, so my dad had me help him orchestrate this whole thing that he was doing for Easter Sunday. And so I have that memory etched in my brain.
Sure. So this topic today is finding your path, right? And I think it resonates with your story and mine as well, because of our parents' history, right? And the profession our parents were in. Your dad was a pastor. I guess the expectation, if not of your dad, I guess of those around your family and yourself, were for you to follow in your dad's footstep, right? And you chose a different path. You chose to find your own path, find something that you love to do, right? And a lot of times there are persons who find themselves in that exact situation. Like you mentioned earlier, like people would say, like, why don't you be a pastor like your dad? And you would say, well, what does your dad do, right? Why don't you do the same or go in the same profession that your dad does, right? But for those persons who have that, I don't want to say pressure, right? But maybe a little bit of that expectation on them to follow in the path of maybe their parents or, you know, some person in their family that has gained a certain level of success. And there's this expectation of them to follow in that same path. What would be your advice, right? Because you did it, right? You your dad was a pastor, but you first of all started off wanting to be an architect, right? And I think you still wove that into the things that you do now because you have to create these meals and curate all of these artistry with your craft, right? What advice would you give someone who finds themselves in the same or similar situation, and they are also hesitant because the profession that they love or want to do or are good at isn't popular at the moment, or maybe the pressures or expectations around them is getting too much?
Well, simple. First of all, the world calls it intuition. I call it the Holy Spirit.
Absolutely.
The Holy Spirit can tell you what you're supposed to be doing. 110%. Who you are, what you're supposed to be doing, what is your ministry will be built into your DNA. You will feel it. You will know it. You will not be able to run away from it. If you look at my story, I wasn't able to run away from it. I think one of the things that my family understood was, why is this young man cooking at 4? Why is he behind his grandmother so much? Why is he the one out of all the kids? Why is he the one gravitating towards the restaurant business? Why is he the one so food oriented? Why, if we talking about whatever else, I on the planning committee for the food. You know what I mean? It wasn't just because I was greedy.
Right.
It was because that was what my path was. And I think most of us need to pay attention to what our calling is, because our calling is rooted in our purpose.
Absolutely.
And once we do that, then we become better at life. Because I personally believe nobody should be in a job they don't want to be in. Because it takes out so much of your time. And so if you're doing something that you don't love, how are you living? You know what I mean? I really couldn't understand that. And so I would tell anybody, I don't care if you're 90 years old, if you could have one day of doing what you really love to do, you should do it.
No, I think that's a good place to start. That's a good question to ask yourself, right? If there's one thing that you could have done or that you could do for the rest of your life, what would it be? Right? And that's, if you could answer that question, I think it'll put you on the right path of discovering like your purpose and
100%.
the things that you are good at and what you were put there for. No, 100%. So, and for me, I feel like the hesitation that you had in really not choosing the path of culinary, like I experienced that. Like I mentioned in one of my earlier pods that I hated being Myles Monroe Jr. I hated being the son of Myles Monroe. And as I grew and matured, I started to realize that it wasn't a hate that I really had for it, right? It was the fear of being Myles Monroe Jr. I let the pressure of all of these expectations and me knowing who my dad was get to me, right? And I was just fearful of having to fill those shoes. Right. And I remember my dad and I had a conversation, and he would tell me like things similar like what your dad told you. Like he didn't expect me to follow in his step. He wanted me to do what I loved and what I felt that I was called to do in life, right? And that centered around business. So I was 100% in when it came to the business side of things, right? And there may be persons out there who, like I say, you may have doubts of what you want to do, a fear of having to follow in someone else's footsteps that are doing something that you don't really want to do, right? So what can you do to get over that fear? What can you do to excel beyond those expectations that are being placed on you? How can you find your path, right? And quite simple, there are 4 things that I want to recommend. Chef gave his recommendation saying, to follow your heart, right? Follow what the Holy Spirit has given you, right? That intuition, that voice in your head that is telling you that this is what you're supposed to do, right? And to give you some more advice and some action items towards that end, I think there are 4 things that I want to recommend, right? First, it deals with self-love and confidence, right? I think you need to start to love who you are and be confident in who you are, right? Be aware of the gifts that you possess and be aware of the testing that is involved in developing your gift, right? Always try to test positive. Test positive in your character development, test positive in your faith testing, right? Because everything that we go through in life, when it comes to building ourselves and developing ourselves, we will be tested. So I encourage you to continue to test positive and to discover to discover and refine your gifts. Right. Secondly, is self-awareness. Always know who you are. Be aware of your strengths. Be aware of your weaknesses. Be aware of what you're good at and what you're bad at, right? So be self-aware and don't allow anyone to push their strengths or their weaknesses or their expectations on you. Because I think once we know who we are, there's no one else that can tell us who we aren't, right? Yeah. Thirdly, self-time. The development of yourself and your profession, it takes time. So I always encourage people to stay prayed up, continue to meditate, continue to take time for yourself, whatever that looks like. You can travel the world to gain a better understanding of the type of person that you are. And once you meet people, be able to form networks and friendships and all of these things and develop hobbies, right? Pursue new hobbies, develop new things that you can do. Because all of these things allow us to build our character, to build ourselves, to develop ourselves as human beings. And then finally, I encourage you to fail up. Always fail up, right? Failure is an event. It is not a characteristic. I mentioned that in one of my previous pods. So when we fail, we should always look for the lesson in it. Always try to learn something from it. Always try to better ourselves from the failures that we experience in life. Because we are going to fail. Right, there are things that I'm sure, Chef, that you've been through, that you've done, that you have hoped that you would do well at, but you completely,
screwed up.
Yes, and I'm sure even though you screwed up, there was a good lesson in that.
I like that term actually, fail up. Mm-hmm. That's pretty powerful, mm-hmm. And I think most of us, unfortunately, don't see the value in that. Failure. Right, and it's such a remarkable tool, you know what I mean? But one of the things that I would ask you, and again, this is why I was never in this space, because how do people expect, or where do people expect the happiness to stop? If my dad is doing what he loves, and I'm doing something that I don't love to follow in his footsteps, right, that means I'm not as happy as him.
Absolutely.
So you're asking me to stop the happiness, whereas it is his goal to have the happiness continue. So he doesn't want me to stop what I want to do just to be like him, right? Because then that means that we're cutting off the lineage of happiness, and that's not something any father, I think, would want for their son.
No, that's a good word.
You gotta be aware of that. For people who are struggling with what to do and creating and carving their own path, especially when your parents were trailblazers, why does the trailblazing have to stop? What stops it? It's sort of selfish to even believe that you wouldn't want to carry on that part of the legacy. Right. And that's where I'm like my dad. Because even though we're in two genres of work, of career, we're in the same in terms of excellence. Nobody had ever expected me to milk so much out of being a chef. I could have just been a hotel chef and call it that.
No, for sure.
But I was never in that space. I was always in the space of be excellent, be the best. My dad always told me, for example, one of his quotes, and I'll give you a quote from my dad and your dad that I think is amazing. Okay. One was, don't be so happy about, because I came home one day and I was like, I want to be like Michael Jordan, get paid like him. And my dad was like, why don't you be like the person who pays Michael Jordan? Because if I could pay you $1 million,
that means you got,
I make it 10. Yeah. And then I never forget the quote that I love from your dad the most is, and obviously I'm paraphrasing, but an army of sheep led by a lion will always conquer an army of lions led by a sheep. And so I literally, when I heard him say that at an event right there at the Hilton, it changed my perception. Right. Because it makes you realize how you could literally be the best at whatever it is. Because even if you're not going to stay there, you already started to be good at whatever you do. So you see a garbage person being amazing. Maybe they don't want to stay a garbage person, but they already have the DNA of excellence. So now when they move to something else,
that moves with them.
exactly.
Absolutely.
And so that's what I always had, 110%.
All right, cool, Chef. I mean, those definitely, I think the quote by my dad, obviously has always resonated with me, right? And even the quote that you said, or the thing that your dad used to tell you all the time, I think that's something I lean more towards, like as I grew and matured, right? Not wanting to be Michael Jordan. I want to be the dude who signed in Michael Jordan checks.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But I think all of that, and all of this conversation is really to speak about finding your path, right? And not feeling like there's this expectation or this pressure of following in a path of like your parents or a loved one that is held in high esteem in your family, right? Just finding what you love, developing the skills in that love of whatever that profession is, and living your purpose within that profession. I think that'll be something that you will definitely love and continue to be happy at, because Chef, what you said about losing your happiness to make someone else's happy continue, like, makes no sense, right? Absolutely no sense.
And most of the time, the people that try to pressure you, they ain't sure what they dealing with.
They confuse just like everybody else.
I mean, whatever.
No, I agree, man. So, well, this has been a great conversation, Chef. I appreciate you coming on. I think, the reason why I like this conversation is because, I can share this from my perspective, but I wanted to show someone else who also, have similar or the same experiences that I have. In particular, having a dad that's a pastor and really not choosing that lane, because I feel like, the Bible says to go into all the world, right? And preach the gospel. And the world doesn't mean to preach the gospel, doesn't mean you have to be a pastor, right? You can do that in your own area of gifting, right? So I think, the culinary arts is your ministry, right? And that's where you're able to share your life experiences and share with people that you come into contact with. And for me, the business world is the exact same, right? That's a world that I'm able to develop myself in and share my life experience and share my faith in as well. So I think even though, we aren't the traditional pastors in a sense, right? I think in our own area of gifting, we're living through that means or that mentality of still being a pastor or pastoring.
110%. Food is fellowship.
Absolutely.
That's number one. Number two, Jesus was one of the biggest foodies on the planet. He was always eating.
He cooked one of the biggest meals ever, right? In history.
Exactly. So, food was definitely a part of his ministry as well.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, there's parts in the Bible that says how you could preach to a hungry person. Because a hungry person ain't listening. So there is a connection. Even when you think you're disconnected, there are connections.
Absolutely.
And so, I pride myself in saying all the time, my dad feeds the soul. I prepare you by feeding the stomach. Because ain't nobody could listen to nobody preach.
When they hungry, they belly growling, right?
So, again, we ain't power off. We're linked. We're all linked. You're linked in the way that you're doing your podcast and everything else that you're doing now is ministry in a way that is of this now
this generation.
Yeah, exactly. So when people ask, are you going to do it exactly the same? The answer is no.
Absolutely not.
Are you inspired by? 110%.
Always. 100%.
So there is that connection. And again, if anybody is struggling with finding their own path, the best way to do it is do it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Just, you have to just be bold enough to understand that your parents want you to have that same life journey with their sort of guidance and inspiration, but they still want you to be able to say to your kids, this is how I did it. You know what I mean? And so I don't think anybody should feel pressured into being a certain thing just because.
Right.
Because when you do that, you're not happiest.
Right.
And so for me, I couldn't be happier doing what I'm doing.
Now, and then, by all means, if you feel like you want to follow the path of your parents,
100%.
do that.
That's it.
I'm not. We're not saying not to do that, right?
Yeah.
We're saying don't be pressured or don't feel pressured into doing that. Yeah.
If it makes you happy,
Do it.
and that is a part of your purpose, go ahead.
100%.
110%.
Well, Chef, man, thank you so much. Why don't you share your social handles? I know people may want to get in contact with you if you want to see or be fed by Chef at some point. You want to reach out. Let's give them some social media handles.
Well, my website is SimeonHallJr.com. See, I probably use my junior. SimeonHallJr.com. I have all my social links on that. Or you can follow me mainly on Instagram, which is Simeon Hall Jr. as well.
Okay, and we'll put those websites and Instagrams and all of that somewhere on the screen. It'll probably be like right in the middle there. For those of you watching, and for those listening, it's Simeon Hall Jr. That's SIMEON.
Yep.
HALLJR.com.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you can check them out whenever you have time. All right. So that brings us to this segment of the show, milestones, and this milestone for today, I think it's in line with what we've been talking about, right? And it's simply don't live your life up to someone else's expectation of what your life should be, right? Do not live your life up to someone else's expectations of what your life should be. My advice is to do what you love. Find something you love and that you're good at, that you're skilled at. Not just something that you're passionate about, but something that you're passionate about and skilled at as well, and do that. I think once you connect those dots, your life is going to be something amazing, man. And as long as you follow and continue on that positive path and continue to develop yourself, and don't worry about people's expectations or them pressuring you to do things that they want you to do. Do what you want to do. Do what you love. All right? All right, that brings us to the end of this episode. Chef, thank you once again for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it so much. As you know, the goal and vision for this show, for this pod, is to entertain, educate, and elevate you miles high above your fears, your doubts, and any limitation that you may think exists, knowing that those limitations only exist in your mind. Until next time, you guys be blessed.